Yes, please.
Feedback form if you want to fill that in and hand it back.
Okay, you with the environmental agency?
Yes.
You're the only one here for them?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
I wouldn't have any luck if I was the only one. Thank you.
No problem.
So the Environment Agency, you'll see the gentleman there with the white shirt, and this is the EA stalls there, and then the next, one up there is the EA, so plenty of people with EA.
Okay.
And then we've got the HSC here, York City Council as well, I think they're over in the corner. So if you want to have a wander around, speak to people, let them know what your concerns are with everything. But don't ask me anything.
Is it okay though to take pictures of the display, not the people, just the...
Whilst they're there, yeah, it might be possible.
Just for the information that's on there?
Yeah, or they might be able to send it to you. So yeah, just ask them there, it might.
Oh, okay.
It's not up to me.
No problem. Thank you.
Tea and coffee over there as well.
Okay, cheers. Hi.
I'm in the groundwater team with the Environment Agency, so if you have any questions on groundwater, I'm very happy to.
A couple of questions I have. How do you prevent the methane from coming into contact with the water, the groundwater?
Okay, so the shallower groundwater. Well, I guess there's a few things to do with that. And it sort of hinges on, right from the very start, that the well's constructed in such a way that you don't connect the various different aquifers on the way down. So I suppose taking maybe the Kirby Misperton and the KM8 site as an example, that you can't just drill a well that goes all in one fell swoop down to the target formation. It needs to be drilled sequentially.
Okay.
So that you separate off the various different layers. So the various different layers will store and transmit water to different degrees. So you have to establish what aquifers are beneath the site, what the thicknesses of each of those are, whether there's any layers of lower permeability material, so mudstones and shales as you go down. So in this sequence here, which is for the KM8, for example, you've got things like the Sherwood sandstone, but you've also got things like the Mercia mudstone. So drilling sequentially and grouting each one in turn to stop the well itself being a conduit to allow fluids or gases from down here to then interact with aquifer or water-bearing strata further up here. So that's one element of it. Another one would be if the proposal were for actually fracking the well, that any fractures need to be contained within the target formation and not to actually breach into aquifers above, and then the resultant risk that you would get an escape of fluids or of methane or anything like that. So they're key things, and the well integrity is key as well. You've seen that the health and safety executive over here, oil and gas authority, health and safety executive can talk more about the well integrity tests, but they're a very key part of ensuring that they don't have an impact on the environment, the water environment as well.
How do you, how common is it for these things to break, or like the wells to break?
Well, you see various different statistics. There's statistics that say that a large majority of wells will fail at some point. Certainly you can see statistics like that from around the world. I think the key thing is that it's like what fails, how does it fail? So looking in each case how it fails, what's failed, if the failure could then actually cause an impact on the water environment or on the safety of people at the surface or on the integrity of the well. So I guess the key thing is defining failure in that case. So, a failure, a catastrophic failure would be where the whole thing is disintegrated and stuff is able to get up and down equally. But it's really important that all of that's risk assessed for what are the pressures that well is under. So say after the well's lived its life and it's been abandoned, what are the pressures that are exerted on it in the normal run of events? is there an upward pressure? Would there be an upward pressure into the well and up to the surface? And things like that have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis.
So the concern is, though, let's say you've got 5 of the wells, and let's say one breaks. Doesn't it affect, because it's all running through the water, if you get one fail, it affects the water, all of it. The water's all connected, of course. So.
And that's where the key thing is to sort of, what is the failure, where is it failed, and that's why, when I...
Well, let's say, for example, if the failure is right there, in the middle of the water supply, and you get a failure there, how will you be able to, reverse the damage? Can the damage be reversed?
No. Well, a really important thing, that my team, the groundwater team, the key thing is that prevention is better than cure, which is where, why we put conditions on permits and make comments on planning applications, because you need to try and prevent these things from happening. So.
But you can't always prevent, which is the issue.
You absolutely can't, which is why it's really key right from the very start that the well in its design is sequentially drilled, so that if you did have a failure down here, it couldn't then get up and into another layer, that you've got several lines of defence there. So that's, so I can see where you had a well that was drilled all in one go, and there was a problem further down. There could be that potential pathway up and into water-bearing strata above. But if it's been drilled so that you're drilling through each of the water-bearing strata as you go and giving them an extra bit of protection as you go, then that makes it far less likely that if you had a failure down here, it could actually get its way into the strata further up. So,
and it's not impossible for a failure.
The world isn't risk-free, but it's a really key thing to break that risk down into its component parts and look at ways to mitigate that risk, and are those reasonable ways of mitigating it, and ensuring that a whole process and a plan is in place for ensuring that the risk is as minimal as it possibly can be.
But let's say we did have a failure. It would mean that all of this water is no longer usable or no longer safe for us to use. Is there an alternative source to this water if we start
grossly polluting our aquifers? No, we've only got a finite amount of water, and the Environment Agency, we manage that water. We give extraction licenses to people, and it's based on on conserving that water and ensuring there's not gross contamination of it. So yes, where the shallow aquifers that we rely on to be grossly contaminated, that's a massive problem.
And so is it really worth the risk then to, even if one fails?
That's why I say that you look at the risk of, what pressure is the well under? What's the upward pressure on this? Is there a pressure that would allow fluids to get up and out into the aquifer that you're protecting and break it? So in the case of, say, KMH, the Kirby Misperton one, there isn't the reason they need to frack is there isn't that releasable water or that pressure down at that level there. So once they frack it and release that gas, there isn't then a latent pressure down there pushing water up into the well and an upward head into these aquifers. So looking at what could actually come up. Well, it's the frac fluid and it's the careful dealing with that frac fluid, but there isn't that pressure of water down there to begin with that's going to start rupturing its way through and getting out into the aquifer, surrounding the aquifers. So.
But that's only one point of failure. What happens if the failure is actually in between where the water supply is? Let's say that, I don't know, for some reason it cracks or it breaks, and then you've got a leak.
So what would come out at that point? What do you envisage is coming out into the aquifer that you're protecting? So where the well cracks or leaks, what's coming out into the aquifer? In the case of if they're bringing gas up here, if there was a fracture right through there, yes, there's the potential for gas to come out there, but in that case, they would have to then fix that. But the gas in itself, because the things that are, of big concern would be sort of heavy metals and things like that are down at depth in the ground. Whereas the actual water all the way through has got a methane content in it already naturally. So it's not that you would actually be wiped out, and the methane would gas off as well. So it's not that you are actually ruining that water supply forever.
But would is that methane already coming through our water supply now then?
Methane is coming from the layers that are gas producing that were laid down in the Carboniferous. It's just venting from the surface of the earth all the time, small quantities of it. But some areas will have higher concentrations of it than others. So if you're interested, the British Geological Survey has a web page devoted to methane monitoring that they've been doing around the country, and some of it's in Yorkshire. And you're able to see the sort of baseline methane levels that they've been finding in groundwater around the country. And some of it's quite high because of the natural effects of the methane that's trapped within the Carboniferous, just making its way up and venting and getting into the various different aquifers on the way up. So,
see, would that be enough at the moment with that natural methane that's coming into the water supply already? Would that be enough for the water to catch fire, for you to light it on fire?
No, it wouldn't, no.
So if you was able to light your tap on fire, would that be a problem?
It would, yeah. So that the problems that we're seeing in the US, with people's taps going on fire, their boreholes were acting like a sump where the methane was gathering, and then it was so instead of the water coming up, the methane was coming out of their taps when they had their pumps in operation to bring the water up. So yeah, that would certainly not be something that we would want done.
So what are we doing different that the Americans are not?
Well, that's a very good question, and there's a number of different things that we're doing differently. My understanding is places where the taps go on fire, that they were fracking at a much more shallow depth than we would allow in England. So we're saying nothing shallower than a kilometre. In the US, my understanding is they had boreholes where people were using it for their own private supply that were in close proximity and fairly shallow fracking as well. So the fracking was sort of at this level and their borehole was at this level, and there's only a few hundred metres difference or tens of metres difference. So they were actual, and the fractures where they propagated weren't being controlled and wasn't fully understood either. So they weren't being confined to the target zone. The fractures could be exiting that and heading off up towards the surface. So they were then contaminating these people's boreholes, which that's not something that would be permitted in England at all.
Not. Because I also saw in Australia, it's about a kilometre away from a fracking site, there was an MP and he set fire to the river just to demonstrate the issue of methane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically in that Australian case, but there's...
It's in Queensland.
They've got problems, and I think Victoria now banned fracking. Yeah, and I think the other difference is the sort of the scale of it, the land mass and the land ownership. So you had farmers who were maybe offered a few tens of thousands of dollars per wellhead, and they own the mineral rights. You're probably aware that they own the mineral rights to the minerals under their feet, whereas it's the Crown that own them here. So for a farmer who's farming some fairly poor agricultural land, scraping a living, have these big oil companies and oil and gas companies come along and offer them a few tens of $1,000s per wellhead, they were saying, yeah, lovely, and they were just putting huge numbers of them into the person's land because here, you know, they have to go through such tight planning and permitting, and there were such objections to them having a proliferation like that you know, there wouldn't be that same density as in the US, where there's just dozens and dozens in a given area, and you know the landowner would have taken the money feeling that they perhaps got a good deal, and then realised all the other things that came along with it, the noise, all the equipment, the large unlined lagoons. That's not to say that that's the way it is in all parts of the US, but my understanding is it's the case in some parts, and maybe when they had older, less regulated industry that came in a few decades ago, and I think there's these unlined lagoons where you're actually storing stuff at the surface and it's leaching into the shallow groundwater and heading into watercourses. These are all things that we just wouldn't allow here. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, well, I hope not, because that's our only water supply.
That's it, absolutely.
The other questions I have is regarding the chemicals. What are the exact chemicals that are being used?
Would you like to see? Because we've got the... Again, this is just... we can sit down at the table if you'd like.
Yes, please. That'd be easier.
Have you had a drink?
I'm okay, thank you.
Right, so let me just find the... So this is based on the Kirby Misperton one. So it'll be different in different places, of course, but this is just a good example. Let me just find Kirby Misperton.
Can I get you a cuppa?
I'm okay, thank you.
Right, so that's another key difference with us and the US, because people often talk about the Halliburton loophole, where they not have to disclose what their frac additives are, but in the case of England they have to. So here's the list of what they have.
Take it's a large list.
It's a very large list actually, so so let's see, we start here and we come all the way down to here. So you can see these are the things we're asking them to test for that might be sort of present down in the ground to begin with, because it's such a so far down and it's so old, and you've got the radioactive content, and once the frac fluids come in contact with it, it's going to release various heavy metals and things like that. So that's covering those, and then the fracture fluid additives are all of these things here. You can see. And these are some other things that they might store at the surface, but that they might not necessarily be putting down the well.
Okay.
So that's all available online for you to see. It's all public register stuff, and it's a very key thing to note that they have to disclose exactly what they would put down the well.
It's not private like the Halliburton.
No, that's right, they can't.
If I get a pen, have you got the web address for that?
Someone's interested in seeing the Thrid Energy KMA experiment. They've slightly changed the format of the website, and I know last time I looked at well, we did. It used to be online. You used to be able to see it online as part of our
Or to make it easier, would it be possible to take a photograph of that?
You can take a photograph of it, of course you may.
I won't take photographs of anything else, just the pages.
Yeah, just so people aren't in the photos, but there's absolutely no problem, because we've said to people if they want to take photos of the posters, and as I say, this is all public register, so you're absolutely fine to take a photo. You're very, very welcome to. So you've got to obviously take it in a few pages. I can take this apart so that you've got it. So, do you want to let's move these out?
Yes, please.
Or we can put it. Does that
Yeah, that'd be okay like that.
And
So
then you just need to take that, and then you'll have to turn it over. I'll turn it to the next page.
camera's playing up now.
Yeah, no. Quite low lighting levels, isn't it?
Let's try flash.
Okay.
No, it's not working.
So you're just going to take a photo or... Yeah.
Let's try it with this.
I can't remember the last time I used something other than my phone for taking a photo.
I normally like to use because I don't like the quality on the phone is not so good.
Although it's getting better and better, isn't it?
Yes. Take a couple just in case, because I know what it's like. You get a couple that's blurred.
Try and make sure it comes out.
Who's asking?
So I'll just turn over the page again. You've got
Thank you.
the rest of them there.
I think it's online still, if you want it.
Yeah, well, I couldn't find it.
Well,
Oh, have you found
yeah.
it? Oh, well
I
done.
typed, if you type Kirby Misperton permit, gov.
So okay, I'll write that
I'll just
one
find
down.
out what's up. I'll go back to Google and find out what I typed in. Type in Kirby Misperton permit. Kirby Misperton.
Misperton.
And then scroll down until you find the gov.uk site. So it's that one. Hit the phone up.
Third energy. Yeah.
Yeah, if you look under KM8, you won't find it. It's not. So yes, so it's on there. So you've got the RAS permit, radioactive substances permit, and then the mining and groundwater activities, which is
And
that
that's
one.
got this in.
I think I'll just check that link works actually. Oh, it's taking my data up.
Yeah, no.
This isn't works phone.
Oh, there's no Wi-Fi here then.
No, yeah, so that's that one. So is that the same permit? Yeah, so that's that one. So it's available as a PDF.
You'll be able
Oh,
to get the
okay.
whole thing.
Thank you.
So,
And another question.
yeah, absolutely.
With the wastewater, because the wastewater can't be recycled apparently, because it's obviously some of the chemicals in there, it makes it completely unusable. Well, that's what I've heard from what the American process is.
Yeah.
What do we do with the wastewater?
Well, you can't dispose of it by re-injection here, and you can't dispose of flowback fluid by re-injection. So it would have to go to one of a number of permitted sites. There are 4 in the country, and I don't know if you've heard, one of them is called Nostrop. It's
Nostrop.
over near Leeds. There's another one, Seal Sands, so Middlesbrough direction, another one Sheffield, and then the 4th one is not in the northeast, so I can't recall the name of it right at this moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
But does that get put in underground? Or?
No, they treat it. They would treat it with various flocculants and chemicals to knock the heavy metals and the different things out of it, and then as long as it complied with the standard that was required to be met, it would then be. It could be, in the case of the Nostrop one, it could be then passed on to the Yorkshire Water Treatment Site and then discharged into surface water once it's actually attained a particular standard.
But what about the water that can't be, or what's left over?
What's
that
left
can't
over?
be?
That would, I don't know specifically in the case of Nostrop exactly where it goes, but the sorts of things that would have to happen is we'd have to go to for hazardous waste landfill and things like that, so it would have to be stored, or they have various different methods for stabilising things like that, and it would then be typically put into hazardous waste landfill. But that I don't know that specifically what happens at Nostrop, but that's the kind of thing that would happen with, you get like in York, where the gasworks have been cleaned up and things like that, you get the hazardous waste element of soil that comes from the gasworks that then have to go to the hazardous waste facility again with a permit with us.
But that's typically without the additives that the industry is using.
Well, the additives would all have to be. You couldn't be released into surface water without it, complying with the standard that was required on the permit. So
would they put it back underground, deep underground?
No, you're not allowed to dispose. The only things that you're allowed to put underground, there's the Water Framework Directive has various exemptions in it, where so there's a general ban on any liquid waste to ground, but there are a couple of exemptions, and those exemptions specifically apply to the oil and gas regime. So that's where I don't know if you're aware that you get gas from conventional layers as well as from fracking them. So
I believe they call that tar sands, no?
They're the ones that they have in Canada, isn't it? The tar sands. But no, there's no tar sands here, so we've got no expectation that people will be looking to. They boil it off, don't they? They run hot water through the sands and get the tar off. No, that's not something that I understand that we'd be doing in the UK.
Okay.
But no, where you can put liquid waste back into the ground, it's where it already came from those depths. So Thrid Energy have been operating for a few decades in Yorkshire, and they extract gas from something called the Kirkham Abbey Formation, the CAF, if you've ever heard of that. And it's a limestone at about 1.5 kilometres, 2 kilometres depth under the ground, so shallower than the Bowling Shale, but still at quite a considerable depth. And the Kirkham Abbey Formation is an aquifer in its own right, but it contains commercial quantities of gas in it. And the thing that makes it good for storing and transmitting the water also makes it good for storing and transmitting the gas. So they can just take this brine out of the ground that contains the gas, and they strip the gas off at the surface, and then they put it back down into the Kirkham Abbey Formation. So they're able to re-inject it in that scenario. They can also re-inject it into a different strata, but that strata has to be designated as permanently unsuitable, and it has to be an isolated strata that contains oil or gas in its own right as well. So you can't just dispose of anything under the ground. There's specific exemptions. If you're ever suffering from insomnia, get the Water Framework Directive out and read. I think it's Article J. It's got the various exemptions.
Article J. If I write that one down.
Or is it Annex J?
Put Article Annex.
Water Framework Directive. Article J. And
Water Frame Directive.
Water Framework Directive.
Framework, sorry.
And there's some exemptions in there under Article J. You'll be able to see the circumstances under which you are able to dispose of fluids into the ground.
What about into the ocean?
That's where I will ask you to talk to the Oil and Gas Authority, because the Environment Agency we cover up to, I think it's half a kilometre offshore. My understanding is that you can't go putting frac fluids or flowback fluids or anything like that, or produce water just into the ocean, but I will refer you to the Oil and Gas Authority because they cover offshore as well as onshore.
Because I've heard that's been said as an alternative to what the Americans were doing, for us to do, to stop the earthquakes from occurring. Because what I'm hearing about the earthquakes is to do with what they're doing in America. Is they're pumping it under the ground.
They do, yeah.
And that apparently it lubricates the gaps, and it makes them want to move more than they would otherwise.
I'd read about that. You get an increase in seismic activity and earthquakes. Well, I know that we've issued some permits for re-injection. not of flowback fluid, obviously, because you're not allowed to, but of this produce water from the conventional oil and gas industry. And we've put conditions on those permits restricting the pressures that they inject at, so that they're not going to then cause seismic activity. They're not fracking the rock, they're putting it back into. But yeah, I was aware that in the US there's oftentimes, my understanding is the main long-term problem comes from these reinjections as opposed to the fracking, which can be a shorter-term thing, whereas the reinjection can go on for much longer.
Because there's been a couple of places like Oklahoma.
Yeah, they've seen a big increase.
5.6, 5.7 magnitude.
And they've seen an increase in that, yeah. So this is something that we're aware of in England, and that we're looking at to try and contain on things like, the Environment Agency permits to ensure that they're not fracking the rock if they're reinjecting. Yeah. So yeah, we're aware of these different things that have gone wrong and want to make sure it doesn't happen here.
Yeah, because like I was saying earlier, if one of the aquifers is damaged, that's it for that aquifer.
Yeah, I mean, the legacy of all our heavy industry shows that it's very costly and expensive to try and put the clock back on these things. So in York, we've got the legacy of the iron roast city centres of the gas works and the impact that can have, and it's very costly to then try and clean all that up. So yeah, it's very important that all along the process there are these checks to make sure that that you don't get gross contamination of aquifers.
What would be like? You're saying about the percentages. What would be the percentage of the? Let's say if you got like 100 wells, how many of them would fail?
I don't know, because there's various different published results, aren't there? From some saying that all of them will, to others saying that just a small percentage. So
I've heard 5% being used, which is obviously if you got 100 wells, it's I believe 5 wells.
And I guess it comes back to what failed and what then resulted from that failure. So it's looking at what are the pressures that well's under. If one part of it could fail, what does that then mean for, so for the example of Kirby, Misperton, KM8, if their target formation's down below 2 kilometres, if you had a failure further down, how would it then get all the way up to the aquifers that we rely on? That's important, that it's imperative that they aren't contaminated. So I guess it's looking at both how often they fail, where they fail, how they fail, and what that actually ends up causing. So fail just is a bit of a catch-all word, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in general. If the water got contaminated with methane and chemicals,
that would be a very, very big failure.
Yeah.
So it's how that then came about, and so with the Environment Agency permit, we seek to ensure that every step of the way there are checks against that happening.
And how many wells can fail that's acceptable before we haven't got any more water? Like
these are questions that are so hypothetical that it's very difficult to sort of hone in on exactly how you would answer it. But I would say that again it comes back to what is meant by failure and what's the result of that failure.
Or in my idea, let's say the failure is contamination.
So we don't want any of that.
No, we don't.
Want any of them. No.
So let's say that happens to let's say 6 or 7 different areas. Would that wipe our water out completely in the UK?
Again, it all depends on how much got in and where it was. But I would say that each area in the Environment Agency has an area team and an area groundwater team, like I'm in, where we're not making some calculated risk saying, oh well, if one aquifer goes, then we've got the others. That's not where we're at with this. We have to protect every aquifer equally. So there's no calculated risk. There's no, you could allow one to go. No, that isn't part of the equation. The key is that it needs to be safe in each and every individual location.
Oh, I understand that. Everyone wants it to be safe.
Yeah, that's right.
But the thing is, it's no one can say that it's never going to fail. There's at least going to be, let's say, a minimum is going to be 5 out of 100 that are going to fail.
And then it comes back to where they failed and what the pressures were. What's the mechanism by which it could grossly contaminate an aquifer? And I think that's the key thing. Defining what failure is. And yes, if people were just able to drill a well all in one go without regard to the different aquifers they encountered on the way down, you could see a mechanism for things to interact. But that's not the way it is. Right from the moment that they design the way that they want to drill their well, they've got to show that they're having regard to the different aquifers in that individual setting, which is why it's a bespoke process, a process that takes a lot of time and a lot of deliberation in a very localised area.
And so, it was on the tip of my tongue then. I hate that when you've got a question, it just goes.
I've been rabbiting at you. It's probably popped
No, that's
out
okay.
Your head.
Is there a way of avoiding the aquifers? So that you drill around them basically and then go under to where you want to go? It's not possible.
No, it's not. Because, looking at this cross section again that the British Geological Survey produced, if you're looking to target down here, well, you've got to go through all of these, and so there's no one aquifer. In fact, it might be useful if we have a look at the map over there. All rock types can store water to some degree, lesser or greater degree, but each one, you can't avoid all of them. There isn't just one aquifer in a given area. There's a whole set of water-bearing strata in a given area, so you can't just get around them. In the case of public supply or supply for people to drink, you get source protection zones, and I'll show you those in a moment actually, where we've said within source protection zone 1, the red zone that I'll show you in a moment, you're not allowed to have a wellhead in there at all. You could drill outside of source protection zone 1, go 1.2 kilometres below, and then go underneath. So in a sense that's avoiding the source protection zone 1, but no, you can't avoid aquifers because we're on one right now. We've got the Sherwood sandstone underneath us.
But I mean, is there just one is all the aquifers connected then in the entire UK? No, or is there areas where you can drill down where there's a separation between them and you've got that gap in the middle where you could go through?
Well, what you get is so all of these rocks were laid down over millions of years, and you get different rocks depending on whatever environment there was in the world at that time. So this blue one, for example, is a limestone that was laid down across Yorkshire, and this one's the Sherwood sandstone. You've got a mudstone, you've got a variety of sandstones and silts, you've got another limestone up here. So where you get mudstones, they tend to cause a separation between the more water-bearing aquifers. So, for example, this sandstone here is overlain by a mudstone. So if there's a sandstone layer up here, there wouldn't be the potential for much interaction between these two. And the scale here will show you that this is in the region of 200 metres thick. So that mudstone would create a kind of a block to the upward or downward migration of water.
What about, let's say, for instance, let's say that this was all, is there areas where you haven't got the water in this area, as an example, and it's separated that way?
No, we assume, because we assume that anywhere that you have a limestone or a sandstone, it's saturated with water. So this water here it was the water within it last fell as rain maybe a few million years ago. So the water in it is very, very old and is completely divorced from what we rely on up here. But it's fossil water. It's water that's in there nonetheless. You wouldn't expect there to be some kind of vacuum where there wasn't any water. So that water is rain that's been trapped, that fell and got trapped in those rocks millions of years ago, and so you wouldn't expect it to be not present in a particular area. Yeah, you assume that if you've got a limestone, it's going to have water. You assume if you've got a sandstone, it'll have water. If it's got water at the surface, it's most likely going to have water.
Is it possible to create a barrier in a sense, or to make the area around the where they're drilling through the aquafill, if they make it a really big area?
Oh, right. By having a really big headworks on their well, you mean?
Yeah. So let's say, if you got obviously the well's not going to be that small, but let's say it's this small. And what you do is they fill an area that's quite large, so even if that fails, there is no way that it could get into the aquifer. I know it would cost them a lot of money.
Well, the way that the well is designed now is by the time it comes to the surface, the most shallow aquifer, they will have about maybe 3-4 sets of casing, so they will have started out quite wide. And the Health and Safety Executive will be able to talk to you about the specifics of that, but they'll have gone in quite wide at the top and then it'll have narrowed in as they go down. So in a sense it already has that protection.
But is that good enough though?
Yes, because it's again, the Health and Safety Executive will talk to you about the actual the pressure testing that needs to be done, but the principles are that it needs to be constructed in such a way that it's not going to breach, or the concretes of a required standard, that the steel's a required standard and thickness. So,
what about earthquakes? Would an earthquake would it be earthquake resistant?
Again, I would suggest you have a chat to because I could have a go, but I think it's best getting it from the horse's mouth. I would talk to the Oil and Gas Authority on that, and it's to do with citing it not on an active fault, that kind of thing. I mean, the case of the one over in Lancashire, the Priest's Hall one that deformed, where they went to frack and it caused tremors, and the well deformed. I believe it sort of got squished at the bottom to more of a rugby ball shape, but didn't actually shear. So I'd have a chat with the Oil and Gas Authority on the specifics of being proof against earthquakes.
Oh, okay. I think that's all.
Yeah.
I take it, are these charts available online as well?
The British Geological Survey have all of these online. You can find any of them online, and you can print them out and download bits of them, and So
if I write the names of these,
please do. So these ones. So you've got Pickering, which is sheet 53.
53.
Beverley, which will cover the chalk, which is sheet 72. And then Hornsey, sheet 73. But it covers the whole of the UK. The reason I brought these ones along is because people have actually drilled wells that are deep enough to be able to see what the geology is, a few kilometres under the ground. On some of them, like the York sheet, they don't have that depth. So it's the cross section is just this little line over the top here showing you top few hundred metres. It doesn't show you the depth at this one. And you can buy them from the British Geological Survey as well.
Okay.
So it's British Geological Survey. They've got loads of stuff. They've got all the methane monitoring that they've been doing around the country, the results for that. So they've got a lot of interesting stuff on there. If you wanted to have a look at the aquifers and the source protection zones. We can do that now as well, if you'd like.
Yes, please. Are there tests being carried out on the drinking water as well prior to the fracking?
Where drinking water supply is in proximity, it would be, but in the case of KM8 there isn't. There isn't a Yorkshire Water one close enough to have that tested. But the permit that we were showing you there, it's got boreholes and watercourses being tested all around the area, so it covers a whole zone around it. And so just to show you, so here are all the different bedrock geologies that are. These are the at or near the surface ones. So what I've been showing you, these cross sections shows what's at depth, but these ones show you what's immediately under your feet. So Selby, you'll have the Sherwood sandstone underneath you there, and quite thick drifts as well. So you get what's known as the Vale of York drift. It can be typically up to 20 metres thick. It's this till that the ice ages sort of scraped up and then deposited all in a big wodge on top. Then, here's one of these mudstones here, and this is the chalk. If you ever go walking over on the walls, the chalk walls, and this here is the Corallian limestone, supplying water for Scarborough, Pickering, and Malton. And then we classify each of. So you were saying, will it always contain water or will it be an aquifer? So we classify each of them depending on how good an aquifer they are. So here, these ones are principal aquifers, so they can store and transmit large quantities of water, and they're ideal for public water supply, factory supply, that kind of thing. So you'll see some of these mudstones, they're classified as secondary, which means that they might be good for local supplies, but they wouldn't be good for like a very large industrial or public supply purpose. So then we also designate source protection zones around individual boreholes that are for public water supply abstraction, or if people have their own borehole that they drink from, that has a source protection zone as well.
What these red circles?
So the red circles are the ones that I was talking about, where you can't site a wellhead within a source protection zone 1, but you could site it outside. And in any event, you can't frack shallower than a kilometre. So you have to be at least a kilometre depth.
But what's to stop a company from lying? Let's say something went wrong, and they just decide to cover it up.
You can't do that. That is how likely that risk is or not.
Are you saying that and we didn't find out, kind of thing?
Yeah, they lied to you, and they lied to everyone. Obviously, companies can be they're motivated by profit, and there's a lot of profit involved, so they could.
I suppose there's a lot of regulators involved, and a lot of conditions they need to apply, need to comply with.
Right, yeah, I mean, that's very valid.
We've got various monitoring that they have to do and that they have to supply to us. So if they were to start giving spurious results, that's something that would be picked up, that didn't fit with what we understood from that site. I'm not saying people would never lie, but the whole thing of permitting is that they have to be constrained by the conditions on the permit, so it makes it relatively difficult to just lie outright in a gross way.
Just on the monitoring, with Kirby and Misperton, of course, there's been quite a bit of third-party monitoring going on. So British Geological Survey have been doing some monitoring. So if they were to submit falsify some monitoring data themselves, the operator, I'm not saying they would do that, then we would be perhaps we might do some comparisons against that third-party monitoring data, which would identify the differences. And on occasion we do carry out our own monitoring, of course.
And we visit sites. We've seen them collecting the groundwater around Kirby, Misperton, and they then have to send it to an accredited laboratory, which has to maintain their accreditation. So
Yeah, so they couldn't hide it really.
It would be difficult, I would say. Yeah.
And I say these charts are available on the
You're able to
website
find
as well.
those. Yeah, if you look on gov.uk and put in what's in my backyard. I always remember is it what's in your backyard or what's in my backyard. Yeah, what's in my backyard, and you'll be able to find source protection zones on there. It'll also show you the aquifers as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You're down here, did you say? Was it Selby?
Selby, yeah.
So you've got quite a number of abstractions that Yorkshire Water have, so there's source protection zones for those.
And so can they can frack inside this blue area then?
Potentially, yes, they could.
And do we know what sites are going to be or what they're going to be using at the moment?
We know what. This off actually, it's just difficult to see. We know where the pedal licenses are. Where are we? It's not helpful because it hasn't got the cities and towns on there. Oh, Leeds.
Yeah, so York
That's a good start. So Selby. Yeah, Alkane is an operator interested in coal mines.
Okay.
Usually coal mine methane rather than hydraulic fracturing. I don't know what that. I suppose Tony might know what that pedal license allows them to do. I'm not sure whether that's a hydraulic fracturing. I think it's highly unlikely with Alkane. There's one next to it. Hutton. I'm trying to work out where. So, where are we? Oh yes, Leeds.
Yeah, Selby's.
Oh yeah, Solomon Leeds. Oh yeah, okay. So you wouldn't believe it. I'm actually from Yorkshire. I've lived here for a while. But I'm from Halifax. I don't know where Halifax
Well, it's
is.
very difficult to locate yourself on something with everything greyed out.
You're kind of over here, aren't you? Though, so it's interesting. It's I don't know where.
You're not quite in.
I'm not even sure whether you are actually inside a pedal license or not. It's not clear because you're south of York.
Will you be able to see this? Well, actually, if you go, have you been talking to Tony from the Oil and Gas Authority? Yeah. If you wanted to have a chat to her next, she'll be able. I think she's got a map that has slightly clearer where the different towns and cities are.
So those are the initial license blocks. So potentially the oil and gas company could explore within those blocks, but there's lots of other permissions they need: planning, environmental permits, and further permission from the Oil and Gas Authority before a drill bit hits the ground. But it looked from that you don't have a lot of pedal licenses around where you are actually. To the south of Selby. Do you actually live in Selby itself?
Yeah, in Selby itself.
Yeah. So it looks like there's some pedal licenses around this area, south of Selby.
As you say, they're more exploring maybe the mines.
Yeah, because Alkane is an
just take the methane.
They're interested in coal bed methane, so drilling into coal, just use coal beds to extract the gas from there rather than hydraulic fracturing, which is something that's been going on for a long time in this country. There's lots of coal bed methane wells.
We got some of those mines put in the 80s, aren't they, round Selby? So
wouldn't it be better just to use the coal? We've got plenty of coal. And
I mean, these are questions where, for our permitting purposes, we don't seek to answer those questions, but they are interesting questions in general. They are like those political, social, economic questions that we need to ask ourselves as a society, really, aren't they? Whereas with us, we're focusing on can it be safely permitted, protect people and the environment, and we sort of have to divorce ourselves from those bigger questions in a way.
I mean, coal is the dirtiest fuel that you can burn, though, in power stations from a carbon emissions perspective. So,
but they've developed carbon capture now, so they can.
Well, they've been talking about that.
Hasn't it been tried?
Yeah, there was going to be a demonstrator. I think the government withdrew. They were going to
They
invest
did,
£1 billion.
They
I think
withdrew
was.
it. I think now it's being trialled in China, isn't it? Trialling the carbon
lost
capture.
track, but
Yeah, the funding was pulled in the UK for it, but it had gone.
that is interesting though, because if carbon capture and storage comes online, it'd be interesting to see how the energy strategy will change. Whether there will be a move back to those forms of
Coal that's fairly readily.
well, it's economically, it's cheaper, I believe,
to
to
get
burn
it.
coal, but it's just such a dirty fuel, from an emissions point of view. The air quality around power stations that are burning coal isn't particularly good. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops.
Oh, it would be.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, very nice to talk to you. So I think, do you want to talk to Tony from the Oil and Gas Authority about the seismic side of things, and then Health and Safety Executive about the tests that are done on the integrity of the wells. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Tony's not there, that's not Tony, by the way.
No.
Tony's a lady.
Yeah, where is Tony gone? Is she the only person
she's
who's
coming
gone,
back
so-
now. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. She's got the Canadian lady.
No problem. Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
I've got some questions.
Okay.
How safe is the process of fracking? Is there a risk of the water coming into contamination with the methane?
I think that's a question really for the Environment Agency. I have my colleague here, but I can talk about seismicity, and I can talk to you about the physical operations on the site of drilling.
That's like with the where the wastewater is going to go after it's used.
I'm afraid that's an Environment Agency issue as well. Owen.
So
sorry,
where the
are you from- I'm the
wastewater
oil
has gone
gas
so
authority.
far from the few wells that
Oh, I've talked to the environment people.
has been off
really
to
concerned,
basically a
'cause
sewage treatment works, so the sewage undertaker. And I think there are hundreds of those sites across the country. I think there are 4 of them that are kind of active at the moment or permitted, particularly for that material. So so that's where it's gone so far. The question hanging out, I suppose, is re-injection. Is that something you've heard of?
Yeah, but the concern is if they're putting it back in the ground, like with Oklahoma. They were doing this in Oklahoma, and then that was causing large earthquakes.
So the kind of what has made the news so far, I suppose, is the thought of the hydraulic fracturing causing a seismic event, which is what happened in Pre-Salt. But it was a very small event in the States, so in Oklahoma, and also in Canada. There's some up in Alberta. They've had quite significant, or much more significant, seismic events. And it has been from the re-injection, not from the hydraulic fracturing. There's one in Alberta which might be from the fracking. At the moment, they're not permitted to put that stuff back in the ground yet. So, can you re-inject? No. It affects other things as well. So, some chemical firms, nothing to do with this industry. Just I've got a chemical plant. Can I put my waste down a hole in the ground? No. Are we looking at it? Have we thought about it? We have. We have a report that's I work in the research bit. We're about to publish next few months a report onto re-injection as to what we think about it. On the basis of that, the answer is going to stay no, I would say. So can you re-inject? No. So they'll be doing something else with it. What else they do with it, it will need to be treated appropriately. So it's partly that's partly an issue for us in terms of, particularly if they want to discharge the environment. It's partly an issue for the water company, who's operating the treatment plant. So if it's your treatment plant and I bring you something you don't want going through your treatment plant, then either you'll charge me a lot more or you'll say no. So that's kind of where we're going. So.
And it is possible for the water, like with the chemicals that are being used in the process of fracking, for that to be treated.
yet. So there's a variety of kind of waters. So there's the stuff you pump down to do the frack, and then some of that comes back over time. So at the moment, our view is that the best thing to do with that is use it again on the next hole.
Okay.
And just keep using it as long as you can. At some point, maybe it will pick up things out of the formation, which means it's no longer in spec for what you want to use it for, at which point it will become a waste. And again, you go through the treatment process. What does it need to be? How do you need to treat this stuff to manage it appropriately? So there's that. There's water that comes out of the formation. To be honest, for shale, there's not going to be a lot of that, I think, because there's not a lot of water down there. Whereas for a conventional oil well, quite often there's a lot of water. Quite often most of what you pump out is water, and you skim off a bit of oil, and then they do put the water back down the hole.
Is there any chance, or do you know if the chemicals that they will use will be safe to, or will be able to be treated?
So one of the I work in the research bit. But one of the teams that I look after, we do the chemical assessment. We do it for a range of scales. So we also do it for something called REACH, which is about all the chemicals you might have, for anything. For hydraulic fracturing, we have a list of 39 chemicals which the companies have said they want to use. So we've assessed all 39. Again, there's a report which isn't published yet, and the reason that's not published is we now need to walk that around the other agencies. So ourselves, the Scottish, the Welsh, we usually talk to the Republic as well, and we all take a view. Out of those 39, there's one of them which we think will probably class as well, which will class as hazardous.
Do you know which one that is?
Acrylamide.
Sorry?
Acrylamide.
Acrylamide.
So the answer will be don't use hazardous substances. It could be those other regulators or those other jurisdictions. They might look at our list. They might have a list of their own. They might have a different view on ours. So there's a kind of negotiation, but there's a getting together really. What do we all think? So the name for that is the Joint Agencies Groundwater Directive Advisory Group, JAGDAG.
Big name.
So it's the way we all get together and figure out which chemicals are appropriate and which aren't. So that's where so you'll hear people say hundreds of chemicals and things, and it's not where we're at. I think most of them are, and 38 of them are non-hazardous and fine, really. So,
What about plans? Is there any plans of putting it in the ocean?
What, water?
Yeah, the used water.
Not as far as I know.
I've heard
again,
somewhere that there was
an
idea.
Any disposal route, you would need a permit from us, and probably if it's going to a sewage treatment works, you need a commercial agreement with the people doing that.
But what about in the IC, international waters?
It's an awful long way. It's not something I've ever heard of, so I'm not sure who would answer that.
And I heard it somewhere that there was
Right.
there was sort of an idea that that's what they could do. They could dump it off into the into international waters in
A way
the
to take
ocean.
it, isn't it?
It is, but they're saying that to do that it would dilute, so it would be safe. That's what I heard from
Right.
that idea, which I thought was.
To be honest, I don't know about international waters. For any kind of disposal within England's boundaries, which is what we control. If you want to dispose of something like that, you need a discharge consent from us, and we will control what goes in that. So, I don't know about this.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
I can't imagine how they would do it if they wanted to do it that
Seems
way.
like a long way.
Unless they built a big pipe or something, pipe going out.
I mean, we have discharge consents on things like sewage works, which which do discharge in the end to marine, but not to international waters. Certainly, that's just kind of Blackpool or somewhere, isn't it? Or, so again, we control what goes in or what comes out of those pipes.
And would you know the chances of if an earthquake occurred? Let's say we had like a 5.7 or 6 on the magnitude earthquake at a well.
Right.
Would the well be strong enough to support that earthquake?
I think. Yeah.
Well, that's
that's HSE. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And I take it this information you've got here, is this, have you got a website for all of this information?
Well, this is, so I'm Environment Agency, this is OGA.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of it is on there. Certainly things like the pedal areas. And quite a lot of detailed reports, particularly, in the first few sites, so there's a lot of interest in them. So I think things like strategic environmental assessment and then assessments related to individual sites is on the OGA website.
So that's the AGI, sorry.
OGA.
Oh, OGA, sorry.
Oil and gas, I think. And you will find it, so the reports I said you publish, you will find them eventually on .gov.uk, insofar as you can find anything on .gov.uk.
No, they've got one of them. I'm not OGA, but it's got their website.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. I'll ask my question to Tony. I just got one question.
Sure.
It's about the well and if it can withstand earthquakes.
Yes. It's a question for the HSC, but I'll give you my view, is that there's nowhere safer to be. I mean, you're talking about a steel tube that's in casing, that's buried in rigid rock, 10,000 feet beneath the earth. I mean, that's just a very safe place to be from an earthquake. And you think of all the oil and gas wells that have been drilled in places in the world that have significant earthquakes. There's everywhere in the Philippines and California and places like that. The risk there is that they have an earthquake that actually causes a fault so big that you shear off the whole well is cut by the earth movement. But just a seismic wave pulse going through a rigid member, I don't think it's a risk at all.
So if there was like a, let's say 7.5 or let's say 6 point on
if you have
magnitude
6,
earthquake,
I think we'd be looking at it very carefully.
Yeah.
There's no question there. But if we get the sort of earthquakes that you normally get in the UK,
oh yeah, the small ones
the
we
3s,
normally
4s,
get.
and 5s, which would be a big earthquake from a frac-induced seismicity, I don't think your well integrity is at risk at all. Now, in our hydraulic fracture plan, there is one of the points is that if they got a significant earthquake, they would go back and check well integrity. But you're asking my personal view. I don't think that's a risk at all.
Do you think there's like, is there a level of like the strongest earthquake that there could be that could withstand? Is there like a limit to that?
There is under the it has to do with the strength of the steel, and I think most of the tubing that they get here fits the American Petroleum Institute standards, and those are built to withstand certain tensile strength. But I'm not the one to talk to you about that. You need HSC. So let me grab Tony Bourne.
Okay, thank you.
Tony Allman. Have a seat.
Hi.
We have a question about the steel that's used and earthquakes. Go for it.
So what I would like to know is, let's say you had a 7.5 magnitude earthquake where the well is. Would it withstand that? Or would it
It depends.
break?
I think there was a study done in but in earthquake zones, basically, where there are oil wells. So there was a big study done in California after the last big earthquake that was there. I think it was Los Angeles area, somewhere like that. And they found that there was an uneven pattern of wells that were affected and wells that weren't. So some wells weren't affected by the tremors at all. Others were, but what had happened to them was that the casing had sheared, which meant that you had some of the well. So basically what had happened was you got the bottom of the well like that, the shear had gone something like that, and the top of the well had ended up something like that, which meant that actually nothing came out of the well because the bottom of the well was isolated by the movement of the earth. It is possible that you could get some leaking wells because of something like that. Obviously, 7. It's pretty much unheard of in the UK.
It is, but you can never tell though.
You can never say never. No, but we wouldn't ask the operator to build wells to withstand the 7 because the chances of it happening are so slight.
But still, even if it's slight, isn't it best to build it to a standard that's higher, just in case?
Well, we do ask them to do that, yeah. Again, they have to design and construct the well to 10% above the pressure that they are intend to use on it, and 10% above the pressure that the formation actually can exert on it as well. So we do that, but not from the point of view of going to the 7 on the Richter scale, because that's very, very unlikely.
What about a method of closing the well should there be a situation like that? I heard the Russians did something in the 60s. They used a nuclear bomb at the time because there wasn't anything powerful that wasn't nuclear. But they closed an oil well this way.
Well, there are things called downhole safety valves. So again, if you think if you were in if this country was an earthquake zone, for example, we'd insist on a number of downhole safety valves that would so you could isolate the well in different portions, and they're remotely operated. But now at the moment, a production well would have 1 downhole safety valve in it, maybe 2, and that would isolate the well.
And how would that operate? Would that operate like on a sensor? So let's say there was like an earthquake that did this.
They can operate in a number of ways.
Would do it automatically.
Yeah, they would operate on the basis of pressure, or they can be actually remotely operated, so by somebody pushing a button. So if there's a difference in pressure in that area of the well, then the valve will close automatically.
And but saying that, let's say like you've got this situation occur.
Yeah.
You won't be able to then remotely connect to that, like this area to do anything with.
It's not a wire connection; it's a radio type connection. So you'd still be able to.
Oh, it still reach that area.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to how far that can go down, that radio connection?
It depends on what we would. You see, we don't specify limits. So we say, if you've got a risk in a particular area, you need to convince us how you're going to manage that risk. And it's up to the operator then to produce a way to actually do that. So we don't say, oh, you need to use this equipment or that equipment. We want them to show us how they're managing the risk.
Okay. And you say that the wells at the moment in the UK, they would cover up to these levels here, like what's the highest on here?
It depends upon which area the well is. Like I said, we don't specifically look at earthquakes. We look at the pressure from the formation. So each formation will have a different pressure, and that can be quite a lot, up to 10,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. So, and again, we look at the pressure that they're going to exert in the well. So there are wells offshore that are over 20,000 pounds per square inch, which is a huge amount of pressure. So the industry are used to designing things within those parameters, and like I said, we insist that they go 10% either side. That's part of the design standards that we scrutinise before they're allowed to start with. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. We don't specifically get them to look at earthquakes unless we think there's a specific risk. seismicity is an issue. And like I said, when you look at the studies, it doesn't give you a clear picture because you can have a 7 earthquake. I think they looked at, it's only from memory, but I'm sure they looked at around 30 wells in LA, and more than half of them have not been affected by tremors at all.
But the other half have.
But the other half had, but to varying degrees, and there was only one of them that actually had failed to that extent, and that's experienced at 7.4.
Was there any contamination?
No, I don't think so. But, again, it's been quite a while since I've read that study. I'm sure there wasn't any contamination at all, because I think that situation occurred where the well was actually isolated at the bottom by the movement of the fault.
With there being obviously there's going to be at least one well that will fail statistically. Like if you've got 100 wells, I've heard the figure of 5% being
I've heard that figure too. Again, it's not something depends what you mean by well failure. Okay.
I'll say what I mean by the well failure, where you get contamination between the
That's
chemicals
what I mean by well failure
into the water.
The studies that say 5%, that study from America that said 5%, they use the different definition of well failure. So, in their definition, a failure of one of the casings within the well was counted as a well failure. Okay. In the UK, if one of the casings fails, it doesn't necessarily mean, in America, in some states in America it's a bit different because they allow single-cased wells, so you get a well casing failure, the well will contaminate something. In the UK, we don't allow single-cased wells, there must be at least 3 layers of casing if the well's going to pass through any type of aquifer, whether it's potable or not, near surface. So a failure of one layer of casing, or any failure of any safety critical element of the well is reportable to us by law. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something that's going to come out of the well, because the other layers of casing and again at the top of the well there are at least 2 valves that would need to fail to allow anything to come into the atmosphere. And so any of those type of failures are reportable to us by law, and we would oversee that being put right. It's all repairable, so we don't really have that issue of that 5% of wells fail, because there are multiple barriers that have to fail before the well actually contaminates it.
But still, you couldn't rule out though that one well would. You can't rule
fail. Out. No, otherwise we wouldn't need a regulator. If we could just say, oh yes, these things can be designed and constructed in such a way that there will never ever be a leak, you wouldn't need it.
Let's say if one well fails, is it really worth it in regards to
I don't know what you mean by worth it.
For safety reasons, for the safety of the drinking water.
It depends what happens when the well fails. From our point of view, even if there is a well failure, that does not necessarily mean that it's going to kill lots of people or injure lots of people.
Oh no, but it's going to.
The environment, it depends on how the operator then is able to manage that process.
But if it affects the aquafill, so that the aquafill can no longer be used.
Yeah, well, again, if the well drills through an aquifer, if the EA wouldn't allow the well to be drilled if they thought there was a risk to the aquifer. And I don't know whether they talked to you about source protection zones.
I've seen that.
So they wouldn't, where the drinking water comes from, the critical source protection zone 1, as they call it, they won't allow it to be fracked in that area. Simple as that.
So the other aquafills then that is being done, like where the wells are being built on, that's we don't rely on that at all then.
They can drill through potable aquifers. But not near where it's being extracted.
Okay. Well, that's all my questions for that.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Help a little bit.
No problems.
Cheers.
Take care.
No problem.